Okay, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be talking about this book called Consilience. It's by Edward Wilson. What is Consilience? Consilience is all about the unity of knowledge. It's about how we can take what we've learned from different areas, different subjects, and combine them together in order to fully explain and understand phenomena in the real world. So for example, one way to illustrate this would be to ask the question, why is Coca-Cola successful? If you were to ask an economist, they would perhaps focus on the purely economic factors in a rather hermetic way. They would possibly talk about supply chains, they would talk about the network of factories that Coca-Cola has built, which has enabled its product to be readily available all around the world. They would focus more on the supply and demand elements and the pricing of the product. But of course, to fully understand Coca-Cola, one would need to look at the biology and the psychological factors as well. So with regards to the biology, the fact that first of all it's a drink, we have a basic biological need to drink. It also contains sugar and caffeine. Sugar gives us a dopamine rush, makes us feel good, gives us energy, and of course caffeine does the same, but is an addictive substance. So in analysing Coca-Cola, one could put the tongue and the brain further under the microscope in order to explain why people enjoy the taste of Coca-Cola. Not only this, but very clever marketing over the 150-year history of Coca-Cola has given the product a lot of appeal as well. So for example, every year we see the Christmas adverts on TV, Santa Claus drinking a bottle of Coke. What the Coca-Cola company has done is associate the taste, the brand of Coca-Cola with the Christmas spirits, with the good feelings of generosity, of giving, of family, of wholesomeness. So in our minds, we've kind of associated the two together. So in order to explain fully why Coca-Cola is such a successful company, and it is an amazingly successful company, one would need general knowledge across many different disciplines. And this book is about the synthesis of theories, of explanations, of understanding in the most general sense, which necessitates breadth of knowledge, not necessarily depth. There's an ancient argument about, is it better to be a specialist, to have esoteric knowledge, highly specific skills in one particular area, or is it more advantageous to have a good level of general knowledge? Of course, the answer to that question depends on what you are doing. So for example, if you're a computer programmer, in that situation it would be better to have more technical, specific skills, the language, Python for example, or whatever it is you're using, to have specific knowledge and skills in applying that in a very specific technical way. But if, like Charlie Munger, the reason why I bought this book is because it was recommended by Charlie Munger, who was an investor and therefore needs worldly knowledge, needs the whole picture, needs to see the wood through the trees. If you're somebody who is studying trees, like a computer programmer, you'll need specific knowledge of the leaves and of the DNA of the leaves and the components and phenomena that trees have going for them: photosynthesis, chlorophyll. But if you are an investor and you're looking at the forest more generally, then you're going to need to have more knowledge of the ecosystem as a whole, the various flora and fauna, their interrelationships, how they interact with each other, to produce the complexity that forests and rainforests and the natural world often involves and brings up. So what he does in this book is he first of all talks about how science, starting with physics, starts off to try to explain how things work at the simplest, most fundamental possible way. So, of course, atoms aren't fundamental matter. Atoms themselves contain subatomic particles, and then possibly further string theorists would say that fundamentally everything can be broken down into little filaments, little strings of energy. But we don't really need to go there for now. He starts by talking about physics and then how atoms combine to form molecules, and the study of how molecules combine is chemistry, and then biology is extremely complex chemistry, the study of how living things, the organ systems, species and habitats, how the various processes thereof play out in the course of evolution to produce ever greater complexity and sophistication as well as diversity. This is the study of biology, very complex chemistry. And then on top of that you have the social sciences. So we have economics, psychology, history and geography. And the point he makes in the book is that in order to fully understand economic phenomena, like the example earlier of the Coca-Cola company, one needs to understand science, the laws of nature, but also specific things which are unique to human psychology. So for example, the various biases, heuristics, human nature essentially, because we, being extremely complex, don't merely conform to the laws of physics in a way that's easy to predict. The opposite is actually true. We're very difficult to predict because we can also be irrational, highly emotional entities, which makes economics predictions nearly impossible in the present time, because we don't have the supercomputing power, the processing power, nor full understanding of human psychology and human nature to predict, certainly over a long period of time, how the real world, how businesses, economies will function and perform, because the complexity is simply too large. And then of course on top of the social sciences we have the humanities, music, arts, paintings, architecture, and so this is an additional layer of complexity. What he's trying to do in the book is almost like a pyramid, or almost like a wedding cake model. You start off with the laws of physics, the things that we know, the basic mathematical formulae which describe, motion and how particles interact, the various physical laws, and then how they interact in the realm of chemistry. So there are things which are more understood at a chemical level. So for example, the concept of entropy, by which inanimate matter over time breaks down into simpler, more spread out, more homogeneous, randomized systems. So the inanimate part of the universe is tending, in many scientists' view, towards what's called the heat death. So the stars are essentially evaporating, all of that energy is being spread out over an ever greater space. And if you fast forward the clock, many billions of years, the energy will be more uniformly distributed across a more spaced out universe. And so this is entropy, but then of course biological things are tending towards ever greater complexity, ever greater order. Life on the planet has been evolving for 4 billion years, and so what we possibly see with living things is the opposite of entropy, things tending towards ever greater complexity. So the point of the book is that in order to fully understand things, you have to have knowledge, you have to have gained knowledge and understanding of at least the main principles, the main concepts, the main ideas from the different areas in order to appreciate that the world is actually incredibly complex. You can't just reduce, certainly the human world, economies, artistic endeavour, you can't predict with a high degree of accuracy how things will play out because of psychological factors and our strange quirks. And we're incredibly diverse. People are extremely varied with regards to their personality, their various propensities and how they will behave in different circumstances. So what he's trying to do is give the readers an appreciation of the necessity of knowing a lot about a lot. The ancient idea of breadth and depth, he seems to be advocating breadth. In order to gain deeper understanding, one needs to combine knowledge learned and gained from different disciplines, and that is the central premise of the book. It's very encyclopedic. If you don't have a general good knowledge of science, it would be a book worth reading because you'll learn a lot just on the knowledge level. Myself, I didn't really gain a lot from reading 80% of the book because studying A-level physics and biology and also keeping abreast of psychological developments, The New Scientist and various online material, my level of science was quite good before reading the book. But if you're someone who hasn't really looked at science in school, this would be a good book to read. The book is quite old now. It came out in the late 1990s, and so some of it feels a little bit outdated. For example, at the end he talks about concerns going forward, which he focuses on the environment. He talks about the challenges that regularly come up on the news regarding global warming and environmental change. He does go on about this quite a lot in the last chapter, but he doesn't, for example, talk about AI. And in the 1998, when this book came out, that wasn't a topic on the horizon. That wasn't really thought about, except perhaps in Hollywood movies, The Matrix, Terminator, all of these films which arguably have given people a negative prejudice almost against AI, because these images of Terminator and The Matrix, they sort of stuck in people's consciousness. Again, so in trying to understand AI and technological development and its implementation in the real world, even with this example, one would need consilience knowledge, because to predict how it will be implemented, to some degree, has been affected by movies like I, Robot. Millions of people have seen I, Robot, and so they have fears. They have some, perhaps, misconceptions about technology. And so the world is a dynamic place, and there are factors affecting our behaviour which are not always visible, and they come from seemingly disparate areas of personal and public life to affect our opinions and our behaviour in subtle ways that we're perhaps not even aware of. And this book is a good book to read. If you're looking for something to give you a good overall picture, a sense of science as a whole and how it feeds in to other areas, the social sciences and the humanities, such as to create a Consilience whole, this would be a good book to read. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.